The views and opinions expressed on Coffee and Compatibility are those of the podcast host and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of ASHI.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Coffee and Compatibility. I am Eric Weimer, and with me, as always, who answered the phone when this all began, Dr. Kelly Hitchman. And then Mr. Jeremy Sherrill, who was recruited off the left field and brought on as a co-host. How are you guys doing?
Still alive.
Yeah, that's actually probably the best answer. Best
Couldn't be better.
Also not in the script, which is awesome.
I'm doing amazing because it's like 35 degrees here today, which means I'm in shorts. Oh. I'm in shorts. You can't see it on camera. I'm all business up top, but in shorts.
It is actually kind of cold here too, and I don't like it. Just gonna be honest with you.
It is not cold here, but
well, that's because
Texas.
I was gonna say, like,
it is not cold here. But perhaps we're under some like fire warnings here. I know there are, as we record this, there are blazes going on out in South Carolina. No. So yeah, craziness all around. So I guess if I didn't live in Texas, I would be grateful for it just being cold in the winter. I don't know.
I mean, I'm ready for spring, right? Like, yeah. North Carolina weather, it was like literally 70 degrees a few days ago. And then this morning was 28. So
yeah, I just want to play tennis. I'm just counting down to 10. When it hits about 35, 40 degrees, I'm ready to play tennis.
Yeah,
I can't find anyone to play tennis with at that temperature.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, dude. I mean, come on. I mean, I like outdoor sports too. I like outdoor sports too, but that's a wee bit chilly.
Well, speaking of how cold it is in Michigan, we are coming up on the ASHI Educational Workshop, which is going to be right here in Detroit. At the Motor City Casino Hotel. That's June the 26th through the 28th. Again, here in Detroit. That's my neck of the woods.
Awesome. You got any tips on what people should check out while they're in the Detroit area?
I absolutely have tips about what people should check out. So I've
How
already
do you
checked.
feel about Coney Island?
Top tip. We want the top tip. The top tip.
No.
It's apparently not Coney Island. Give us the top tip.
Well, I mean, my favorite thing is going to be the Detroit Tigers, which are just down the street from the venue. They are at home that week, and I even checked it out. It's Tyler Holton bobblehead doll night, and what? I know y'all weren't expecting that on the Coffee and Compatibility podcast. There are other things though that are awesome. The Detroit Institute of Art is pretty awesome. The Motown Museum is something you got to check out, and the Temptations are my all-time favorite musical group. So the Motown Museum is something you got to put on your list.
I feel like I should have known.
I have none of that. Yeah, I have none of that talent. Thank goodness Jeremy knows his Detroit, because I will take you up on that advice. The only thing I know is that if you haven't already, you need to be signing up for the ASHI Educational Workshop. You need to be registering your staff. Early bird registration is open. Don't wait, because discounted rates end on June 2nd. And then the regular rate kicks in, and we want you all to get that money. Keep that money. If you need financial support, you let us know, okay? There's a travel fund award. Awardees receive complimentary registration to ASHI Educational Workshop to $1,000 in reimbursement, and applications for that opened on March 1st, but they close on May 1st. So don't sleep on that. If you need help securing employer support, we have you there too. Download a sample letter from ASHIeducationalworkshops.com and help make your case. Get that money.
Nice. You know, if you haven't heard, ASHI has a YouTube channel, and I think it would be awesome if you just subscribed. Content coming.
You should. Eric's an influencer.
Oh, let's
He's
simmer
influencing
down,
you right
Hitchman.
now. He's influencing you to
Oh
subscribe
my
to
God.
things.
This is, I don't even have a response to this. I'm done. I'm done with you.
Influencing. We want more, Eric. We do. We do want more, Eric. We want more influencing from you. You have influenced me to like sprinkles on my donuts.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And see, that's like a little thing. Subscribing to Ashi YouTube.
You might also get some science. Okay, you might also get some
A little bit of science.
A little bit of science, a lot of bit of fun. That's why it's on YouTube. Just saying. Subscribe.
Don't sleep on it. You know what else? You can get like a little bit of science and a lot of fun. Today's episode, a lot of science, a lot more than a little bit of science, because we have Dr. Geoff Funk with us. He is the CEO of an OPO in Texas. He's going to talk to us today about normothermic regional perfusion. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short break.
Renew your Ashi membership and continue accessing career-boosting benefits like certification opportunities, professional networking, and exclusive discounts on Ashi events. Stay informed, stay connected, and keep advancing your career in the HLA field. Don't miss out. Renew today at www.ashi-hla.org.
Welcome to today's episode, Coffee and Compatibility listeners. Today, we are joined by a true expert in the field, Dr. Geoff Funk, who is the Chief Medical Officer at Southwest Transplant Alliance, leading efforts to optimize donor physiology and enhance transplant outcomes. He is a former trauma surgeon and surgical intensivist. He has held academic roles at Texas A&M, TCU, and UNT Health Science Center. He earned his medical degree from Texas A&M and completed his surgical training at Baylor and UT Southwestern. And he is a board certified general surgeon and in surgical critical care. So we're so excited to have Dr. Funk with us today. Welcome, Dr. Funk, and may we call you Geoff?
Absolutely, and so excited for the invitation.
Oh, thank you so much. So I was very fortunate to hear you give a talk on normothermic regional perfusion at the Texas Transplant Society meeting in 2024. And this is something that we don't get to hear a lot about in HLA laboratories. There are some amazing innovations in this space and also some existing perceptions of controversy. So I really am so grateful to have an expert of your tenure with us today to try to flesh those things out. So can we start, Geoff, by asking you to explain to our audience, what is NRP? What is it?
Absolutely. It is a really exciting new technology that is working in the space of organ donation. In general, I'd say that there are two paths that can be followed separately or a single path synergistically between machine perfusion after an organ gets out of the body, and then this concept of NRP, or normothermic regional perfusion. And in that case, we are utilizing technology very similar to what you would see in a cardiopulmonary bypass OR, a heart OR, to reperfuse organs after the patient's death, after the donor's death. Not to get too far into the weeds too quickly, but the vast majority of organs that we've transplanted over the last few decades have fallen into the category of brain dead donors. This is very particular for DCD, or donation after circulatory death donors. And what that allows is a higher quality of organ in those cases, because those organs tend to have suffered more through the dying process, rather than the brain dead donor that stays well perfused throughout.
Geoff, I kind of want to go back to the origin story of this. So our listeners will know I'm a huge Marvel fan. You can tell, Geoff, by the background here. And I am a big fan of origin stories. So could you enlighten us as to where did the idea for using NRP, in the cases that you talked about, where did it sort of originate from? In your opinion, why is it such an important advancement in what we're doing for our patients?
Yeah, NRP has some history going back quite some time, less so in the United States than in Europe. but it is effectively just the application of a way to perfuse organs in the process. Back in 1997, the Institutes of Medicine had a report on that donation after circulatory death process that said, really, we're starting to maximize the number of brain dead donors and brain dead organs that we can utilize. And so we have to look at this DCD population as a potential source. The problem is, in those cases, and maybe a little more context is necessary, patients are taken to the operating room usually for their comfort care process, for the withdrawal of life-sustaining treatments. And if a patient passes in a timeline that allows for donation, those organs are then recovered and transplanted. The problem is, because of that time course in the process, those organs don't function as well. One great example, if you look at kidneys, for example, in general, if you take a kidney from a donation after circulatory death donor and transplant it, the need for dialysis for the recipient of that kidney hovers somewhere probably 70 to 80%. At least one time they'll need dialysis in that first week. A brain dead kidney, on the other hand, looks at somewhere around 15% likelihood of that. And so with these technologies like NRP, we're able to get that organ reperfused in the body before recovery. And what we're seeing is a dramatic decrease in that need for dialysis, that delayed graft function. In fact, we have some internal data recently that suggests that between normothermic regional perfusion and some of the machine pumping technologies after the organ is out of the body, the delayed graft function in those kidneys is almost identical to the brain dead kidney. So it's really taking an organ that isn't functioning as well and turning it into something that is truly desirable for transplant. What that ended up meaning is, after 1997, I think STA did our first DCD kidney in about 2007, but we haven't had the uptick in organ utilization to the degree that we'd love. And so with this new technology, especially over the last 2 to 3 years at most centers, we're starting to see just a massive increase in the number of organs that are considered transplantable with good recipient outcomes.
It sounds like there's a major advantage to doing NRP in terms of both the quality of the kidney that's recovered, and it's not just kidneys, correct? It's other organs as well.
Absolutely right, and that's a great point. The real push for NRP to be utilized came from the heart and the liver recipient centers, the transplant centers. DCD hearts almost never happened historically because we know of the injury of lack of perfusion, lack of oxygenation to the heart. That has dramatically increased. When we look at our NRP population, at least locally here, we saw with the utilization of NRP about a 40% increase in the number of hearts that were transplanted, about the same in liver. When it comes to liver, the true concern for transplant surgeons is something called ischemic cholangiopathy. And it's a problem with the bile ducts that occurs after these prolonged periods where the organ just wasn't getting the blood supply and the oxygen that it needed. And it condemns that individual in most cases to a need for a new transplant, but it's 6 months to a year later. And so you only find out well after the fact. And there are a number of studies now demonstrating that instead of having to abandon recovery of that liver at maybe 25 minutes, we have centers going out to 2 hours, putting it on this technology, and the incidence of ischemic cholangiopathy has dropped to almost zero. It is truly stunning how it allows the organs to recover. I kind of look at it from the standpoint of a trauma career. You know, an individual will come into the emergency department after whatever injury they have, and they won't be perfusing well. Their blood pressure will be low, their oxygenation will be low, and be it surgical or otherwise, once we fix those issues, while we're going to see for a while the kidneys not working as well, the heart not working as well, the lungs, so on and so forth, over time, those organs recover such that you may need dialysis, and then that's a temporary factor. You may need the ventilator, no longer do you need it. And so we're seeing it in pretty much every organ. The lungs are a little bit more debatable. The data seems to be pushing in the right direction, but lung surgeons are a little hesitant on that one, and I don't blame them. Obviously, they're looking for the best outcomes for their patients.
Ooh, can you elaborate on that a little bit? I know that at our center, We've had some internal chats about NRP and being more, participatory with NRP with our organs and the costs associated with that for our procurements and our centers. And I have heard lung people talk differently about NRP. Can you go into why that is?
It's a great question. There are a couple hypotheses in the process, and I don't think we have all the data necessary. The lung surgeons are frequently much more concerned about some of the inflammatory mediators that occur with the death and dying process and their potential impact on organ function. Obviously, perhaps more than the other organs, inflammatory change in the lungs causes lack of ability to exchange gas, and so the transplant has a higher likelihood of failing. What we're seeing, and this is entirely anecdotal, is it seems more how we manage the intravascular volume of those patients. And so if we are thinking through the process in terms of trying to minimize congestion, minimize volume overload, the lungs seem to be doing well. And so we're starting to see more and more centers moving in that direction. But as is always the case, it's going to take some time to demonstrate enough result to be able to convince everybody of that. So we work with the centers. Actually, it is an interesting piece that I think will be coming to the forefront this year. Because NRP is accessing blood vessels, but we can obstruct blood vessels as necessary, we can actually do NRP in one half of the body, subdiaphragmatic or supra, and not do NRP in the other, do a standard DCD recovery. And so we're able to protect the lungs and in the way that the lung surgeons want them while still preserving NRP for the livers and the kidneys.
Okay, that's kind of cool. I don't outside of my expertise, but that sounds awesome. But I did want to touch on the fact that completely being a somewhat newbie to this topic, I've heard controversies related to NRP usage in this particular context. Can you touch on some of those and what they might be?
Absolutely. And I think some of it stems from DCD as a whole. As I mentioned earlier, this is a process where we're taking somebody and we're providing their comfort care, or the hospital is providing the comfort care somewhere around the OR to allow for organ donation. And so the way I look at it is that we have an individual or a family that has two distinct goals in the process. One is that the individual is allowed to die comfortably, and we absolutely have that right. The other is that we're able to pursue donation if it's a possibility. And there are a lot of factors that play a role in whether or not it's possible. Even those criteria are changing as we speak. So I think it's very important for those in the process to realize success isn't measured in whether or not the individual dies in a timeline for donation. We can't control that factor. We can control the comfort care piece. I am technically a biased individual in this process because I work in the transplant industry, but I do like to use the forum to say, we're looking at a comfortable death for the individual. So from that standpoint, we're already having some ethical issues. There are people that are a little uncomfortable with how much pain medication, for example, do I provide? Am I hastening death? The ethicists have largely agreed on that one. If you're providing medication because that individual needs comfort, then the medication is appropriately administered, whether or not it hastens death. So now we layer on top this NRP piece, and sometimes you'll also hear the term ECMO, though people are more familiar with cardiopulmonary bypass. One of the arguments is, well, if we can use this technology to maintain life, are we not doing something unethical by not allowing this person to live with this technology? And I think it's a reasonable argument as a starting point. It comes back to those two original questions, though. Are we allowed to achieve, or are we able to achieve the quality or quantity of life for the individual that they desire? Some people would never want a tracheostomy. Some people would never want a feeding tube. Some people would never want to be on dialysis permanently. All of us have our own opinions, and hopefully we've communicated those with our families. In this case, yes, ECMO cardiopulmonary bypass can keep the individual alive, but are we ignoring their desire for their quality of life or their comfortable death by trying to pursue that technology? it certainly allows people to follow their wish of being able to save lives in that unfortunate event that we all have of dying. That's one of the big ones in the process. There is also the question, while we're using these technologies, be it thoracoabdominal or just in the abdomen, is there any blood flow getting to the brain whatsoever? And so is there the possibility that there's any sort of consciousness? There are a number of studies, especially in Europe, and I won't belabor you with some of the details, but there's effectively no perfusion, and there are interventions that we can make to make absolutely sure there is no perfusion to the brain in this process, such that there isn't consciousness. In both DCD and NRP, we do also pause after pronouncement of death, generally lack of respirations and no palpable pulse. Some centers also use arterial line waveforms, making sure they're flat or asystole. But we wait another 5 minutes. There was an article in New England Journal a few years back demonstrating that the longest period of time before the heart spontaneously restarted, though not permanently, was 4 minutes and 20 seconds. And so effectively every institution uses at least 5 minutes before we even consider pursuing, so as to adhere to what's known as the dead donor rule, to make sure we're not doing anything inappropriate.
So I think all of us are interested to know, because we're scientists, right? We're data people. So what does the data say about NRP and the impact on organ allocation and organ use rates in the United States? And is this technology like perfect, or is there more for it to grow? What more can we do to capitalize on this new technology?
Yeah, great questions. This is an evolution. If you looked back 3 or 4 years ago, there were probably about 5 centers, transplant centers specifically, that were using this technology. It had not yet been pulled into the OPO space. And so a couple of centers that would come to this area, I know Baylor University Medical Center here in Dallas would do it. California Center too, I believe UCSD and maybe UCLA. Vanderbilt would come, and they'd bring their perfusionists, they'd bring their technology, because it really does allow transplantation of organs that would otherwise have been deemed non-transplantable. When we look at the DCD population as a whole, even a year ago when we first pulled our data, we were seeing about a 40% increase in the number of organs that were transplanted from a donor compared to that same donor without the NRP technology. I think we're early in the process to see its largest impact. I think that kidney data that I mentioned earlier demonstrates that the ideal final state is probably going to be something using both NRP and machine perfusion, because we're seeing that combination over time demonstrating that the organs are better. They are able to last out of the body longer, and especially as we're working through recent controversy in terms of how the system functions and how the organ allocation lists are run. This provides more opportunity to make sure that the system is as fair and equitable as we all want it to be.
So, Dr. Funk, we talked quite a bit about some of the ethical concerns that are out there. Are there still transplant centers and OPOs that are hesitant to employ this technology? And if so, how do we address those concerns and expand its usage so that we maximize the donation potential nationwide?
It's another great question. There is certainly a question from a state governmental standpoint as well as hospital system standpoints as to what the right side of the issue to come down on is. And so without naming names, we absolutely have centers that are unwilling to allow us to pursue NRP in their facilities. For that reason, we actually started a program here in Dallas 2 years ago to be able to centralize some of those DCDs at a specific hospital that allows technology usage like that. And that has also made a tremendous impact. I think that's increased our organs transplanted by about 15%, simply by making that technology possible. I think part of the answer is going to be what happens from a legislative standpoint. I think part of it is a question of experience. time and data will help convince people that this is best for the organ donation system and best for the recipients, and it's not causing harm to the individual that is the donor, which obviously is one of our prime concerns in the process.
Thank you very much, sir, for the time. It's been incredibly fascinating to hear about the advances and where we are and where we're going, and the controversies, I guess, that are going on there. But thank you very much for spending some time with us.
Yeah, I've only been in the organ donation space for about just over 3 years now, and it is such a fascinating and exciting time to be able to ask, why do we do the things we do, and why can't we do more? And I think we have a lot of opportunity. I feel blessed to be in this space right now.
Well, we're certainly glad you are. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
We'll be right back after a short break with Tech Talk.
Welcome back to another edition of Tech Talk, where we celebrate the incredible contributions of technologists in the HLA field. And today we're going to be giving a shout out to Crystal Moore. Crystal came into the lab with a strong background in blood banking, but no HLA experience. And in just 3.5 years, she has absolutely crushed it. She's taken on leadership roles such as the lead tech on both the flow bench and the NGS bench, and is now stepping into the world of LIS and bioinformatics. There's a future guru in the making there. Not only is she a rock star in the lab, but she's also earned her CHT certification and is well on her way to the CHS, and is already giving back to the HLA community by serving on ASHI's Educational Initiatives Committee. Crystal, your dedication, drive, and get it done attitude do not go unnoticed. The lab and the field are lucky to have you. Thank you so much, Crystal. Hey there, Coffee and Compatibility listeners. Do you have a technologist that you'd like to spotlight? Nominate them by sharing their story with us. Email us at info@ashi-hla.org for a chance to feature them in an upcoming episode of Coffee and Compatibility. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just a few moments to recap our thoughts on today's episode. So we just wrapped up a fantastic talk with Dr. Geoff Funk about NRP. Eric, Kelly, what were your thoughts?
I loved hearing Dr. Funk give this talk at Texas Transplant Society. I mean, from somebody that doesn't, directly deal with NRP, but that also realizes it has a huge impact on organ allocation. Like, I want to know more, especially when you hear, there's so much controversy in transplant right now. There is so much controversy, a lot of which, again, this is my opinion, is born out of some lack of understanding of the process. There's lots of controversy surrounding timing of procurement, definitions of brain death. And NRP just kind of feeds into all of those curiosities. So what better way to realize the potential than to understand what it is and how it works?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to hear, what they are capable of, right? I don't go to ORs. I don't do anything along those lines, but they have such a dramatic impact on overall patient outcomes and recipient outcomes and quality. So I think it's just important for us as a community to remain, on top of the, advances that are occurring, and sort of echoing what Kelly has said, that, remain a data-driven, discipline, in the face of all the things that are going on in life.
I do feel after hearing Geoff talk, I feel like I understand more. Oh, yeah. And I think to be a good partner in practice, you need to have regular chats, with your clinicians. So now I feel like I can go to my clinicians and at least have some quasi-educated conversations about, hey, tell me about our center's approach to NRP and our different organ systems. And I would, I think that is a good conversation to be had. So if you're listening to this podcast and you've never had that kind of chat with your clinicians, I bet they would appreciate it. Go for it.
Yeah, I know we say this every single episode, but I really wish we had another 20 minutes or another 30 minutes here for this interview, because I know I had a list of things I wanted to ask about that we just didn't have time to get to. But I'm fascinated by the ethical discussion. I'm fascinated by just the technology itself. This seems like a pretty dramatic opportunity, or a pretty significant advancement to improve both the quality and utilization of the organs that we're using for transplantation. So a really important one for us all to educate ourselves about. And regarding the ethical discussion, I know I'm gonna be really careful just as I read things, that I don't just read things by myself, that I read things and then go ask people who are more experienced, to interact with the technology more, to get their responses on things, rather than just sort of reading things online, in isolation.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I
folks,
think that.
oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think the ethical considerations that he touched on, and I mean, we're somewhat, as he mentioned, a biased group, right? But I think being cognizant of them makes us a better, like, professional society, right? That
Absolutely.
these are real concerns that people have, and these are, very important moments in individuals and families' lives. And, I think remaining cognizant of them is an important aspect for us to continue and be familiar with.
Absolutely.
100%. So, dear listener, if you're around folks who are talking about this topic, who are talking about controversies in transplantation, you can listen to the podcast and hopefully have something to contribute to those conversations. And if you want to listen to more episodes of the podcast and be able to participate in more of those conversations, give us a follow on ASHI HLA's YouTube channel. Again, we are ASHI HLA. All of the podcast episodes from this year and a few from prior year will be up there. So check it out. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We would love to have you with us.
It's been fun as always, guys. Till next time. Bye.